I see we have some viewers joining us tonight, so I want to thank you all for being here with us. My name is Brian Shum. I'm the Associate Principal at Mountain House High School. We want to welcome you to our first Site Council meeting of the year. So I just want to start off with some quick introductions. Site Council, the reason we do it is an opportunity to learn more about what we're doing here at the high school and to provide some input into those key initiatives. So I'll let Ben introduce himself.
Hello, folks. My name is Ben Faubert. I'm the principal here at Mountain House High School. Glad to be here tonight.
Then we have a couple of teachers with us here tonight. So next up is Lauren Savage.
Hi, my name is Lauren Savage. I teach honors and AP physics at Mountain House High School.
And Shelby Schofield.
Hi, I'm Shelby Schofield. I'm an ELA teacher at the school.
And then Carrie McQuack.
Hi there, I'm Carrie, and I'm a CTE business teacher, and I'm also the department chair of the CTE department.
We also have Mary Lindsay on our council. She might be joining us at some point tonight, so we can hear from her too. But our objective tonight is we want to help you gain an understanding of how we're using good first teaching strategies to consistently improve instruction. So this is our focus on solid, just very essential teaching strategies. And we're going to take you through what those are and why we're using them. So we started off with some introductions. I'm going to do a brief overview of some current data here at the school so you get a picture of who we are and what we're doing. We'll talk about the good first teaching strategies, what they are, why we're doing it, how they came about. Then we'll ask our teachers to share some examples of what those look like in the classroom. And finally, tonight, we'll wrap that up with a Q&A and give you a chance to ask any questions and provide any input. If you're joining us on YouTube Live, you can comment on there and we'll see the comments and be able to respond to those questions when we get to the end of the presentation here. So I'm going to turn our teachers off for a few minutes and welcome them back to share some examples as we get towards the end of the presentation. And I want to start off by sharing data of the school overall. So one of the pieces of data is the amount of growth that we've gone through over the past few years. And that's kind of the Lambertville Unified District and us as a high school overall. So if you look back in 2016-17, we only had 55 teachers at that point, and 24 of them were new hires to us. And we hire teachers who some have experience, some are brand new teachers. But our job is to onboard those teachers, get them on board with our culture, our practices, and what we're doing here, and equip them with what they need to be successful in the classroom. So if you fast forward to 22-23, we're up to 91 teachers now and serving just over 2,100 students. And 26 of our teachers this year are new hires. So we're continually bringing a lot of new people on board here with the growth that we're going through. And this year, with those 26 new hires, 28% of our teachers are brand new to the teaching staff. So while they may have experience that they're bringing from other locations, they're brand new to us. And we have a leadership team that's represented with department chairs from all of our academic departments. 3 of them are new. We have 2 new counselors, 1 new administrator. Logan Loya joined our administrative team, and he's joining us after being a teacher at the high school, and then an alternative education coordinator. He's a new vice principal this year. We're looking to bring in 1 new coordinator of alternative education, and we also have 1 new coordinator of interventions, working with our math students specifically this year. So we've gone through a lot of growth continuously and continue to do that, and we'll revisit this idea when it comes to good first teaching. But I'll do an overview of some of our scores over time. So the CASP is the test that students take every year at the high school. They take it in 11th grade in 2 major subject areas. They take it in ELA, reading and writing, and then they take it in math too. So at the end of 11th grade, students take that, and that's one of the major measures of how our students are doing overall. And we use it to compare how we're doing to other districts, to the state, and against ourselves. We're looking for continuous growth. So if you look at our scores over time from 2015 and 16 to current, or just this past year, you can see some continuous growth in those areas. You'll see a black bar across the school year, 2019, 2020. That was the year that we got locked down for COVID. So CASP actually wasn't given that year. So overall, our scores exceed significantly what the typical score in San Joaquin County and also Alameda County and the state as well. So we're constantly comparing how we're doing to others, but trying to see how we're growing against ourselves. These are our science scores. The CAS test it's been given for a long time in ELA and math, but the science test is relatively new. So it was given for the first time in 2018-19. And again, those scores are slowly growing over time. And we're looking to improve those consistently as we go forward. Another key piece of data I want to share with you is the numbers of students that we have in some of our high-performing programs. So the top category on the chart over on the left shows our total number of students. Last year we were at 1,966 students, and we added about 200 for this year. So a little bit of growth. We've seen growth in our CTE programs. That's our career and technical education. 69% of our students were enrolled in those programs last year, up to 73% this year. And then a lot of growth in our AP programs. Those are advanced placement class. So we've gone from 23% to 37% of our students taking AP classes this year. And overall, the scores from our students who are in the AP program are extremely good. So if we look at this past year, 2022, almost 80% of our students were passing those AP exams with a score of 3 or higher. And that's significantly higher than the state overall. And another key number I want to point out is the number of students that we have taking AP classes and the number of classes that they're taking. So many of our students just taking one class, that's fine. We have 219 students taking 2 classes. Lots of other students taking multiple classes, and we have 1 student this year who's taking 6 AP classes, which we don't recommend. But I think that's impressive that they take on that number of AP classes. So overall, if we look at our data, we're a high-performing school in comparison to the schools around us, the counties around us. Particularly when we're looking at our high-performing students, they're doing really well. However, we have a significant number of students who remain in those bottom categories. And so when we compare that, or when we take that and add in the fact that we're continuously bringing in new teachers and into our culture, instruction becomes really of utmost importance to us. So our instructional focus for this year is we have a desired outcome. We want to consistently improve instructional practices to increase the amount of time students are engaged in active learning and discourse. So we know from research that students learn best when they're actively involved and they're doing the work. And a lot of times they need the time, the opportunity to process the learning that we're asking them to do. And they do that through discourse. That's conversations with their peers, questioning from the teacher. So we're looking to increase their time in active learning, not passive, and talking to each other and talking with the teacher. So our specific goals to reach that outcome and continually improve what we're doing is our main one is to deliberately plan lessons that integrate learning goals, hooks, content literacy strategies, and checks for understanding. And we'll talk a little bit more about what those are because we want to actively engage all students in a variety of ways for the duration of the period. So when a student comes into class, we want to give them something to do as soon as they come in, and we want to keep them actively engaged throughout the period until that bell rings at the very end. And this year, we're paying particular attention to those students and the unique learning needs that they have. And these are our students on the bottom 20% when we look at grades. And we want to reach them specifically with our consistent application of these deliberate strategies. So when we talk about good first teaching, the goal of this is for as many students to understand what we're teaching the first time around. We know that there's always going to be some students who the teacher needs to go back and explain it in a different way. They need to reteach certain things. They need to provide choices for the student to be able to demonstrate what it was that they learned. But our overall goal is to use these strategies to make sure as many students as possible learn it the first time around. So we always start with a learning objective. That's a clear, student-friendly learning target, which clarifies how the target will be assessed. So we tell the students what they're expected to learn during the period and how they're going to demonstrate having learned it. So each of our teachers should have this posted in the classroom. They should be introducing it to students at the very beginning. They should be talking about it, communicating it, and ideally involving the students in it somehow, asking the students why it's important, and which gets into our hook. So once we've introduced the students to what our expectation is for what they're going to learn, our goal is to provide a hook. And that's some kind of compelling introduction for each lesson. And that's a 1 to 2 minute pitch or preview to help students see the relevance of the day's lesson. So those two things kind of work together. We want students to understand what it is that they're supposed to learn during the period. We want them to understand how they're going to demonstrate having learned it. And then we want the teacher to help them make a connection to why it's important to them. And we know from research that taking those two steps is going to improve learning outcomes. And the big reason we're sharing this information with you tonight is we want you to know the expectation for what's happening in the classroom. So if you have to contact teachers, you can have conversations around these types of things. And when you're having a conversation with your student, you can ask them how these things are going in the classroom. So our big goal tonight is to let you into how we're addressing this, really so you know what we're doing. So once we've hit that learning target, we've hooked the interest of students, our next goal is to use very deliberate content literacy strategies to engage students in literacy. And that means they're reading with a purpose, writing with a purpose, and engaging in discourse. And that's conversation that they're having with each other or with the teacher. And so that's really the bulk of the lesson. And this is where we want to actively engage students in learning, either in actively reading, writing, or that discourse. And then finally, after we've given them an objective, we hook their interest, we've used those content literacy strategies so that they understand the content, we then want to check for their understanding. So when we check for their understanding, there's 3 parts to that. The teacher checks to see if the students understood it. This can be whole class, it can be individual or small group. Based on that check and what the teacher sees, the teacher's goal is to provide feedback to those students. They've done a great job, they've done these types of things to meet that objective, or they haven't. And if they haven't, we want the teacher to be able to take some kind of action based on those results and address the students who did not learn it the first time. And that can include pulling a small group of students to work with in the classroom. It could be as simple as reteaching. So if a teacher teaches a concept during the class and they notice maybe 70% of the students didn't understand it, that tells them they need to go back and teach it again in a different way. Maybe use some different examples, a different strategy to help students understand it. Or another thing that they can do is call them into success period, which is our daily intervention period during 5th period, where students can get remediation on certain skills and concepts, redo and retake assessments, and just generally get extra support from the teacher. So the combination of these things are what we call good first teaching. As many students are getting it the first time around as possible. So just a quick history of where this comes from, why we're doing it. is the leadership team realized several years ago, right before COVID, is as we were bringing a lot of new teachers on board, we didn't have a consistent language around instruction. So we've always been focused on blended learning, combining the use of technology with sound instructional practices. But it was kind of ambiguous what we were expecting from teachers. So starting in 2019-20, our leadership council, they started looking at some research and looking at what strategies we could use and expect to happen every day in the classroom if we really wanted to impact students and continue to raise the achievement that we were looking for. So we started that work. Of course, we had a break from it in 2020, 21 was our COVID year. So we didn't implement it that year. We came back to in-person instruction last year, and the school began a school-wide focus on these essential elements, which we're calling good first teaching. So the teacher's job, implement those strategies every day in the classroom. Our job as an administrative team is to provide the intensive repeated training opportunities. So this year, we've changed our bell schedule a little bit, which opened up every Friday as an early release day. And teachers are spending a lot of those Fridays getting training around these strategies. And this is the training calendar for the year, or for the first semester. So you can see a lot of those Fridays are set aside specifically for work on good first teaching strategies. So in each of these professional development sessions, we introduce the entire staff to a set of strategies that are specific to an element of good first teaching. And then we give them a task. Their job is to go out and try some of those things in the classroom and then follow up with a conversation and their collaboration with other teachers on how it went and learn from each other. That's another one of the unique elements that we have here at the high school is teachers actually have that daily collaboration period with everyone in their department where they can go and have these conversations with them. Another thing we do as an administrative team is we're continuously out in classrooms. Ben's goal is to be in classrooms all day, twice a week. That's my goal too as the associate principal over curriculum instruction. So we go out, we walk through classrooms, and we give teachers feedback based on what we're seeing. And we collect some trend data. So we're looking for these things specifically applied in the classroom, giving feedback, and consistently talking about this data when we come together as a leadership council and an administrative team and looking for ways that we can improve the things that we're doing. Here's some examples of what we're looking for in practice. And these are just a couple shots of a board in a classroom. And you can see on the left-hand side of the screen, this teacher's agenda, they've laid it out based on the good first teaching strategies. So it's listed there. They have a hook. A Kahoot is a game that students can play to review. In this case, they were reviewing some ecology learning that they were doing. And then you can see they have listed some content literacy strategies and a check for understanding. In the middle of the board, you can see an example of an objective. So this teacher was working to clearly communicate to students what it was that they were learning this day and how they were going to demonstrate having learned that. And then another thing I'll point out, on the right-hand screen here, we see some more evidence that this teacher was using very deliberate strategies because they've broken down the writing that they're expecting students to produce during that period. So they're pointing out that they need to have a claim supported with evidence and reasoning, and that all together equals an explanation. So all of this is evidence that this teacher is doing these very deliberate skills or these very deliberate strategies in class to reach their students. Here's just another example from a classroom. You can see again, this teacher has laid out their lesson based on those good first teaching strategies. They have a goal, they have a hook. In this case, they were reviewing some prior learning from students and linking it to why it was important. They have their content literacy strategy, and then a check for understanding. So they're going through those steps very deliberately to see if students have understood that. I'll share some final data here on how this is going overall. So we're in our second year of implementation, full implementation of Good First Teaching strategies. The graph on the left over here is the percent of population of high school students with a D or F, and this was first quarter progress report. So first quarter progress report traditionally has some of the highest number of D and F grades. It's at the very beginning of the year. There's very few grades. If a student misses one or two of those assignments, then their grade drops pretty low. And typically there's like one test within that first progress report period. So if students haven't grasped the concepts, if the teaching hasn't been solid, then their grade is based on that one test. And if they tank it, then their whole grade goes down. So we can see for the first progress report, those grades just came out. This year compared to last year, they're down. And it's at its lowest point that we've recorded this. And you can see over on the right-hand side, the number of Ds and Fs across the department. Those are all based on percentages across the school, and for each department have dropped. And of significant interest and makes us quite a bit happy is in our special ed department, the number of Ds and Fs have dropped significantly, over 10%. Math also down significantly, and our students in the alternative education program, we're seeing a pretty marked decline in that percentage of Ds and Fs. And this is why we're doing it. These Good First Teaching strategies, the reason we put them in place is to help ensure that as many students as possible understand it the first time around. We know our high performing students are probably going to get it pretty easily. But those low performing students need some extra attention. And when we're talking about these strategies, these are things that are good for everybody. It makes teaching more interesting. It makes teaching more likely to make an impact. And it's most essential for those kids on the bottom who need it the most. So I've talked for a while here. I want to throw it over to our teachers to share some examples of how they're using these strategies in the classroom. And Ben, I don't know if you wanted to add anything else at this point.
No, I think you've kind of covered it, and I think I'm interested to hear what the teachers have to say. I've been in all of their classrooms this year, and really excited to hear them share some of their ideas about what they're doing with these strategies in the classroom.
So Lauren, you're first on the screen here. I'll call on you first if you want to do some sharing.
Yeah, sounds great. So this is one of the slides that I have in my classroom. So every day when students come in, I have a warm-up question on the board. I call it the question of the day, QOD. And I do it for both my honors and my AP class. And typically it's a question that, this is my hook, right? So this is where I have my standard and measurable objective posted. That, we're going to apply Newton's second law by doing a problem set involving friction. And typically this is like a question that's content related. It's like a mini lecture I want to give at the beginning of class. So all the kids are on board with what content they'll be learning when they go and do their individualized assignments during the day, the work that they're doing as their classwork. But this one I wanted to point out specifically. So in QOD, I give them about 3 minutes to work by themselves silently, kind of process a question, connect to prior learning for themselves individually. And then after those 3 minutes are up, then they do 2 minutes discussing in their table group. And then we go to a full group discussion where I walk them through the problem, the scenario, whatever, and do some checks for understanding, random calling, cold calling on students, having them answer questions for the class to get us through this one. But this particular one is one that I really enjoy. And I ask my AP students, like, do you guys remember this question? They're like, oh yeah, that was a really cool question, Ms. Savage. We really like that question as a hook to start the class period. And I pose this question. The kids write it down in their notebooks. Like, why do we have to write this down? You have to write it down because that's how we do QODs. And give them the time to think about it, discuss their table groups. What is the most fun part of physics, right? And the kids are talking, like, all right, I like the unit conversions. Okay. I like the labs that we did. We did that water relay lab to learn about inertia. That was really cool. We all got water all over ourselves. Awesome. I'm looking forward to some of the other labs we're going to do. I hear we're going to do egg drop this year. Yeah. Cool. We do bike pump rockets in the stadium. They're looking forward to different things, right? And so I get all of their feedback. So this opportunity for them to reflect and everything, that's great. And then I turn the tides on them, because this is actually my introduction to friction for them, because the equation for friction looks like the word fun. And so they're like, "Oh, Miss Savage, really, you got to do that to us?" And then we go into explaining that equation and then to an example problem, including friction, how friction related to the coefficient of friction, which is a little Greek letter mu, looks like the letter U in the English alphabet, and the normal force, which is a capital N. And so it's a good introduction into friction to get them started thinking about it. But also it has that comical effect, and it sticks in their head really well. They never forget this equation after having my class, because it's the most fun part of physics.
Perfect. Thanks, Lauren. So lots of examples of deliberate strategies you're using. So the question of the day is something that they're doing as soon as they enter the classroom, right?
Yes.
Right. And that's something that we stress across the board. As soon as students come into the classroom every day, there's something for them to do. We want to engage them right away and hopefully keep that engagement through the entire period. So, thank you. We'll throw it over. Carrie, you want to go next?
Okay. So here's a good first teaching example. This pertains to memos. This is in the Technical Business Communication 1 course, which is about professional business comms. So this is aligned with an essential skill, writing a professional memo. So I have my particular objective, which you can see there: demonstrate proficiency in memo development in format and content by writing a business memo based on a prompt and developed in class through practice and collaboration. So when the students walk in the classroom, I have an example of a memo on the board. They are asked to study this, look at it, think about it, and we have a particular discussion on ineffective and effective elements. They aren't necessarily reading it yet, because one of the elements that I'm stressing over the course of this lesson is that the look of the document is just as important as content. So they're coming in and looking, thinking, they have some time to think about, they can talk to each other, and then we have a quick debrief about that. And then I ask them a second question: why did I show this to you? What do you think is the importance of you looking at this? Not even asking you to read it, but to look at it, and tying it back to that. The format and look of the document is just as important as content. And then we get into doing some reading with our content literacy strategies. So we have discussion following the hook. We do some practice memo writing together. The students talk about the memo contents. We look at elements from example memos, the strengths and weaknesses, and we get down into even the sentence content, the word choice, which is a separate lesson, but we have some initial discussion about that. And then I do a check for understanding. We do some practice memos. After we have the discussion, we debrief that. What are some essential lessons that we took from that? I did a Padlet the other day where they were all putting their comments on the Padlet. And then we have, again, sharing of ideas, and they have that mastery assessment to do. Then I follow up with them I've just finished doing this over the past week, going back to them and giving some feedback on what I saw that worked well. And my target is that 80% of the students, greater than 80% of the students, are achieving proficiency upon first submission of the assessment, meaning they have met the proficient category in the rubric. And with this particular assessment, it was really nice to see. It was 92% for the first time. So I've been noting of what worked, getting some feedback from the students of what worked, and we moved on to the next lesson. So that's just an example of what I'm doing, kind of a big picture.
Yeah, thank you, Carrie. So I appreciate the goal that you put in there for more than 80% of your students achieving proficiency. So that's what you're looking for. You're looking at the data of that. And you put in there lots of different strategies that you're using. So during that period, students would be engaged in discourse, they're talking to each other, they're writing, and they're collaborating. So they're developing some new ideas and evaluating the memos that they're looking at. And that's really the whole purpose of Good First Teaching. A lot of us, when we were coming up through our education careers, and I'm sure if you're watching tonight, you can think of classes that you had when you were in high school, where the teacher came in and lectured the entire period. Maybe you took notes, maybe you didn't. And after a couple of weeks of taking notes, there'd be a test. And that's what teaching looked like. But it doesn't look like that anymore. We want to engage students in the learning process as much as possible because we know that's how people learn best based on learning science. And that's what we're focused on. So thank you, Carrie. And last up, we have with us Shelby. So turn it over to her.
So I don't have a slide, but basically, Good First Teaching has helped me simplify my teaching process a lot more in the classroom. It's made me realize that less is more. And so it helped me as a teacher keep the lessons nice and simple so that the students can understand it a little bit more. So the other day, my sophomore English, we're talking about fairy tales, and we're talking about how they are still very much a genre that is relevant to our society today. So the students walk in, they look at the board, and they see our objective, which is talking about fairy tales and real world issues. And so Hook, we watched the new trailer for the Little Mermaid movie, and of course that had them right off the bat because that was Disney, that was people that they recognized, that had singing. And so we talked about why that movie is controversial right now. And then we branched off after that conversation. We all did stations. And so stations helps me hit on all those content literacy standards that Brian talks about. One area, we did a writing assignment where we talked about violence in fairy tales and whether or not it's appropriate. Another station, they were watching movie trailers and how people have taken fairy tales and adapted them into movies. And it goes on and on. But these stations have helped me develop these skills in the kids in a much more concise and efficient way. And so then after we are done with the stations, I take the number one assignment that I believe is the most important. I grade it, and then I take the kids who didn't get credit on that assignment, and the following week I enroll them in my success. And so usually the number varies. So I have about 6 to 10 students who usually come in, but as soon as they get that extra help, they're good, and I send them on their way. And so that's what good teaching first practices looks like in my classroom.
Thanks, Shelby. And one of the really unique ways that Shelby has set up her classroom is students rotate through different stations over the course of each period and over the course of the week. So they focus on very specific skills and tasks within those stations. And several of them are set up so students are working a little bit more independently. Some of them are set up so students are collaborating with each other. And then some of them are set up so that small groups are coming to her and working directly with her. And she's given feedback that's very individualized to those students. And that's really the goal of a lot of what we're doing, is be able to individualize that feedback as much as possible so that we can meet students where they are, help them understand what they need to. So Shelby does a great job employing those strategies in her classroom. So there are 3 different teachers, 3 different examples of how they're employing those good first teaching strategies in their classroom. Again, the whole purpose of doing this is to impact as many students as possible, have as many students understand the learning objective the first time around, and reduce the number of students that we need to work with for remediation or reteaching. So our objective tonight was to let you into what we're doing to impact students, improve the teaching here overall, what we're doing to consistently improve that instruction. And we'll open it up to any questions from the audience that you may have at this point. So you can just type those into the YouTube stream, and we'll get them on our end and be able to respond. We'll stick around for just another minute or so to see if we have any questions coming in. I just want to point out that all these teachers have worked incredibly hard to incorporate these strategies to impact their students, and we're really proud of the work that we're doing overall. So we do have some future dates for School Site Council. The next one is coming up on November 16th. Then we have two in this fall or spring semester, one in February and one in April. And we're going to send out a survey to our parent community on topics they may like to see addressed in future site council meetings. So I don't see any questions coming in. I'm going to let our teachers go. I want to thank them for being here tonight and taking some time away from their families and their time to share how they're using those good first teaching strategies to impact students. And I want to thank everyone who tuned in tonight to learn a little bit more. And if you do have any questions, please feel to reach out to me, and I'll be happy to answer those about instruction or anything else. And have a great night.